Hello, lovelies. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if it's your first time here. It's good to see you. In today's video, I am making some spooky decorations for my Barbie room. Before we get into that, though, I would like to tell you a little bit about why I have decided to do this, because there is a reason. And it's not just for content or because I wanted to, although that is also true. One thing about me is when I was a kid, I have pretty much always been obsessed with miniatures. Part of the reason is because when you're a kid, you don't have access to the whole house. You live with, other family members. And you have to, everybody has to agree on decorations. Or you have, the one person, the mom or whoever, is in charge of the decorations. And nobody else gets a say. So growing up, I had this shelf cubby thing above my desk. And within one of the little cubbies, I would decorate. That would be where the bulk of my decorations would go. And I would make like whole dioramas within this little cubby. I made for Halloween like a whole miniature graveyard one year, house fronts for my little figures to go trick or treating at. I've gone all out with Christmas and made um, a whole little room with like a tree and a fireplace. I've done a snowy scene so my little figures could like make snowmen and have snowball fights and like a whole beach scene in the summertime. So yeah, that was because I was limited on space. I had to decorate in a smaller scale, hence where the love of miniatures kind of started in. So I thought, for those who maybe love miniatures, as I do, clearly, or anybody who might be limited on space and can only decorate on a smaller scale, these crafts would be good for you. Also, it's still September. We are officially now into autumn, but some would say not spooky season yet. I know there are those who decide that they don't like to decorate until October. That used to be me. This year, not at all. Oh, my soul has been craving spooky since August, when I don't know who it was, but someone somewhere called August October. And I was like, yep, I need that. So the bulk of my house has been decorated for Halloween since I think the beginning of this month. I think it was like the first week of September. I started putting everything up because I just couldn't wait any longer. So if you are also craving the spooky, but maybe not on a grand house-wide scale yet, smaller doll-sized versions are a good idea. Also, also, miniatures don't take up that much space. They can take a long time to make because, you have to be really precise when you're working on something that small and waiting for glue to dry and paint to dry. You wouldn't think it would take that long being so tiny, but it does. But in general, they don't require that much in the way of space, which right now in particular is at a premium in here because I one day will do a full studio tour. I've been planning on doing that since we did the big renovation in here years ago. But yeah, I have lost the spark of, well, anything. Honestly, I've been numb for far too long. So, something that I have been doing to try and find or create that spark is totally overhauling my studio. Well, not completely. The stuff and the furniture basically is staying. I'm just rearranging things to see if maybe I can utilize my space, my surfaces, my things better in a different configuration. And also, that table right there used to be my cutting slash crafting table, and it's cheap plastic. So you can see right there that it's kind of warped from years of pushing really hard to cut through thick fabric and ironing. So I got a new piece of furniture. I got to get it cleaned up before I can, move everything from the old table to the new table. But what you just saw there, the mess on the old table, that is what every surface in this room looked like up until only a couple days ago. So it's been really hard to do anything other than crafts that require the smallest amount of space, hence miniatures. So that's where this video came from. That was the process of why I got here. And, also I love miniatures. Clearly you love miniatures. That's where a lot of you have come from, is to see my miniatures. So that's what we're doing. We're going back to the Barbie room from March Miniature Madness, and we're going to spookify it. Okay, let's get to the crafts. This first decoration was inspired by this tiny pumpkin, which was left over from the pumpkins that I carved from last year's Dollhouse Spookification. Those pumpkins came in a 3-pack, so clearly I used 2 for the dollhouse and had 1 left over. I went and picked up another pack of the larger pumpkins. That's what I found this year from Dollar Tree. And I liked how, the big one and the small one, there was a nice difference, but 2 big ones looked weird. So what I ended up doing is very carefully, I shaved off a layer of the foam from one of the bigger foam pumpkins. I'm trying to make it a middle size, so I have a big pumpkin, a medium-sized pumpkin, and a small pumpkin that I can stack together to make this pumpkin topiary. Cutting through the foam was very easy. The foam is soft. You just have to be extremely careful if you're using a sharp knife, obviously. Once I got that outer layer of the painted foam off the pumpkin, I use a nail file just to smooth and soften out that foam a little bit. That is a much better size. But I want the grooves now, how, a pumpkin has those ridges and divots. So what I did is I just carved a shallow line from the top to the bottom, and then did it again pretty close to the first one. And then just with my fingers, I pulled out the foam that I had, cut from those 2 little lines. And then I go in with my nail file again, just to smooth and shape, so it's less of a harsh line and more of the bumps and ridges of a pumpkin, so it looks a little bit more natural. I did that a whole bunch of times to give a whole bunch of bumps and ridges, just to make it look, less like just a foam ball and more like a pumpkin. The foam is really soft, so it's nice and easy to cut through, and you don't have to go very deep in order to get these ridges. It's quite satisfying to pick out the little pieces of foam too. Be gentle when you're sanding as well, because it can end up pulling more of the foam than you want. That's what the pumpkin ended up looking like, and I didn't love it. I didn't think it was smooth enough. So I used some air dry clay, rolled out a little ball nice and thin, just pulled off the stem there, and then proceeded to cover the pumpkin in the air dry clay. This was totally worth it after doing all the ridges and stuff anyway, because I had the base shape. Now I'm just like smoothing and making it look more like the smooth pumpkins that are going to be below and above it. This just makes it look like the other two pumpkins. I started at the top and then just smoothed the clay down around the pumpkin. I made sure to get it into all the nooks and crannies, but not too much, because, you know, I'm trying to hide where too much of the foam got pulled away, so I don't want too many bumps and lumps. And then when I get to the bottom, I just pinch and pull off the excess. It doesn't need to completely cover because I'm going to be gluing all the pumpkins together, but it's got to cover, you know, most of the pumpkin. And then I went in with my silicone sculpting tool just to refine the bumps and ridges and smooth things out. I really like these silicone sculpting tools. They make working with clay a lot easier than just using your fingers. And I ended up going in, I have this completely rounded, like a cone-shaped tool. I liked that one better than the flat tool. I found this one got a much more natural roundness to the pumpkin. The flat tool I found was a little bit too harsh. So I'm just bringing out those bumps and ridges and smoothing and softening the rest of the pumpkin. Flattening the top there so I have a nice base for gluing the small pumpkin. And there it is. Now I just have to let that dry. I'm just testing here to make sure that it's a good size, and it is. Once the air dry clay dried, then I wanted to paint it, and I decided to go with like a pink, but like a pink orange, because this is, you know, Barbie sized, so I thought it would be cute if it was one of those like pinky colored pumpkins. So I just mixed up some acrylic paint, some pink, some white to lighten it, and then a touch of orange just to give it that pumpkin-y color, and then painted the whole thing. I ended up going in with more orange. I oranged the pink a little bit more. And then I went in with just the pink without any white or orange. And I used a dry brush technique. So just, you know, dip your brush in the paint and then wipe most of it off on a paper towel. And then you go in and dry brush with just the pink in the little divots in the grooves, just to give it some shadow and some depth. And I dry brushed along the top as well, again for shadow. And then once the paint was all dry, then I went in with a matte Mod Podge. I wanted it, you know, protected but not too shiny. And I find the matte Mod Podge actually to be fairly glossy. So it still ended up having a little bit of that shine like the other two pumpkins. Now it's time to glue everything together. I used hot glue, obviously. I put a little bit of tacky glue as well to sort of hold it in the long term, and then the hot glue for the instant hold. Biggest pumpkin on the bottom, the altered medium-sized pumpkin in the middle, and then on top, the smallest pumpkin that inspired this whole creation. And I like how all the pumpkins are a slightly different shade of orange. I think that looks really cute. I decided to use the stem of the smallest pumpkin. I just hot glued it though because it was a little bit loose and I wanted it to look less like a decoration and more like an actual pumpkin. And then I glued a paper clip that I had straightened out into the bottom of the biggest pumpkin because I had the planter that I use on the balcony of the doll room, and I just removed the plant that came with it and stuck the topiary. I did fix it up with some hot glue and paint in between the pumpkins, just again to make them look a little more cohesive, and that's it. Super cute. I'm making a new painting to go in this frame. I took the backing paper out and cut a new piece out of this really pretty purple paper. Then I put that into the frame so I could figure out where my painting should go. I just used a pencil and drew a light outline of the frame opening. There you can faintly see it on the purple. And now I'm going to make the currently trendy ghost drag painting. I'm not squirting directly from the bottle, clearly, because this is far too small. But I'm just using a little bit of white paint, and I just draw a rainbow, and then I drag down with an old gift card. That's all there is to it. I thought it was really cool that I could make this in teeny tiny version. I've seen it all over Instagram. People are making these left, right, and center this year, and I think they're super cute. So again, you just make a little rainbow of white paint and then drag it down. I'm using an old gift card, but you could use a squeegee, an old credit card, an old piece of cardboard, anything that's stiff, really. I made a little smear of white paint so that decided for me where this ghost was going to go, so I could cover that up. I decided to make 4 ghosts for this painting, even though I only have 2 dolls to go in this room. I thought it would be cute to have a little nod to my family, so that would be like the ghost version of myself, my husband, and our 2 kids. And then I went in with some just plain black acrylic to paint on tiny little eyes for all of the ghosts. If you look at the tube of paint, you can see it slowly seeping out. I didn't notice that while I was painting with it, but I think that's a spooky little detail. I really like how this turned out. I like when you drag the paint, how it gives it like that ghostly look. So it's just going to go in the frame once everything is dry, of course. There's a little piece of plastic for like the glass. I'm just going to wipe off any fingerprints before I put the picture in. Then I pop in the picture. And then the backing. And finally, the plastic back with a little lever so it will stand upright. And there it is. Super simple, super cute. I really like it. I thought these tiny jars would be perfect for a candle, so that's what I did. I melted some wax melt. I really like the smell of this one. It's a beautiful purple color, and it's called Haunted Castle. It just, it smells dusty and musty and just spooky. I love it. So I just melted that down and poured it into my little jar, and there I am blowing on it to try and get it to cool down, just so it hardens a little bit. So when I put the wick in, the wick stays where I want it to be. Surprisingly, that actually worked pretty well. For the lid, I just used the cork that came with the jar, cut it down, and then put a little circle of air dry clay, just so it would look less like a potion bottle and more like a candle. And then just to zhuzh up the air dry clay, once it was dry, I gave it a coat of black acrylic paint and then a little bit of matte Mod Podge just to seal in the paint. Trying to show this stuff on camera is really hard. I discovered this useful little trick of gripping the cork with my tiny jewelry pliers so that I could better paint the edges, which again, of course, you can't see, but you kind of can with the shadow. That's again kind of spooky. I don't know. It's so hard to film these tiny things. It's fun though. There I am just letting it dry on an old plastic lid. For the label, I scanned and shrunk the actual label from the wax melt, printed that out, and then secured it with some clear packing, well, not packing tape, it was just like clear tape, small bit. And that's it. Pop the lid on, and it looks super cute, and it smells so good because it's the scented wax. I love it. It's gonna be perfect looking in that little Barbie doll room. The foam pumpkins are back. Super cute. These came in a 3-pack at Dollar Tree, and I figured since I had one left, might as well use it. And for this, I'm going with my standard jack-o'-lantern. I love carving these foam pumpkins. I think they look so cute. So for the first step, I used my craft knife and very carefully cut the top of the pumpkin, just like you would if you were cutting the top of a pumpkin so you could get in and scoop out the insides on like a real pumpkin. I'm not going to scoop out the insides of this one, but I just like the look of having the top cut off. It just makes it look a little bit more realistic. You do have to be a little careful when you're cutting the foam because it gets messy fast. After I cut the top off, I went in with a pencil to draw the outline of what I wanted my face to look like. Just because at this size, you can get a little messy really fast. You can run out of space really fast. So rather than freehand, I thought it would be better to just draw a little outline so I'd have an idea of where things would be before I started cutting. I didn't want to start cutting and then run out of room. So I decided on little triangle eyes and a mouth in kind of a smile with 3 teeth. So a very standard, traditional, what you're used to seeing when you think of a jack-o'-lantern. This didn't have to be cut very deep. You're not trying to get like right through the pumpkin. You're just trying to, make it look deep enough that it looks like it was carved. And because of the plasticiness of the paint on the foam pumpkin, I found it easier to like slice, kind of a gentle back and forth. You can see that there. I found that easier. If you just try and drag the knife, it tends to like rip and pull and takes out a bigger chunk than what you're intending. If you just do the gentle little slices, you get a much cleaner cut. And if you cut in little chunks as well. I found cutting the mouth in little chunks, so like I think 4, I broke up the mouth into like 4 little pieces, as opposed to trying to cut the whole thing out. Made it much easier to do. And there it is, so cute. I went in with a neon yellow acrylic paint to paint, well, the white spots. I find the neon yellow gives it a nice glow, so it looks like there's actually a candle or a flashlight or something inside the pumpkin, making it glow from the inside. And you don't have to be neat with this, just slap it on. You just want to cover up that white so it looks less like foam and more like a glowing inside of a pumpkin. If you happen to get any of the yellow paint on the orange, because the orange is already like that plasticky paint anyway, you just wipe it off with your finger. Just like that, it just wipes right off. To paint the inside, I just squirted a bunch of paint and then spread it around. I found that easier than picking up the paint from, you know, a palette or something and adding it. I just directly squirted it in. So pretty. I painted the underside of the top of the pumpkin orange, so it would have a little bit of a shadow, and then I hot glued it to the top. It doesn't need to come out, it just needs to look like it could come out. So that's the pumpkin. I'm starting off with a rectangle of white fabric, fold it in half so it becomes a square, and then with a pencil I drew an outline of a ghost. Then I'm going to use my needle and thread to just hand sew around that outline that I had drawn. I'm using a running stitch and a back stitch to sew this, so I do 2 to 4 running stitches just to speed up the process, and then I go back in on that last stitch with a back stitch before starting the next little bit of running stitches. The running stitches just help to speed up how much you're sewing, and the back stitch is for strength. That's the strong stitch that'll keep this from falling apart. And I'm just going to do that most of the way around. So I start at the armpit, sew all the way around until I get to the bottom, and then knot that. Basically, I'm making a pillow. So if you've made one of those, you're familiar with how to do that. You're going to sew most of the way around, but leave a little hole so that when you're ready, you can flip it right side out and hide all those seams. So there's our opening there. That part you don't sew. Before I flip though, I'm going to grab some scissors and cut around the outline so I have a smaller seam allowance, which is super important when you make things in tiny scale, because you don't want them to be too bulky, otherwise you'll lose your shape. And I'm cutting in a little bit further at the top of those arms there and making little notches at the armpits. You want to make sure not to cut your stitches, but you do want those little notches to help keep your shape when you turn it inside out. And I'm going to use some fray check just to secure the edges so that it doesn't fray. This fabric I'm not sure if it's like a canvas or a denim. It's got some stretch, but there's definitely some cotton, so it will fray, and I don't want it to fall apart. Now, to keep the opening from gluing shut, I have a little scrap here of plastic that I'm just going to stick in there. I thought this was pretty ingenious, because this way I can fray check those edges, and when it dries, the glue just peels off the plastic. You'll pull it back out of the pillow, and you still have your opening. Voila! Now I'm just going to turn that right side out. I don't know if the ghost pillow is particularly trendy this year. I have seen a few people mention it in their Halloween decoration videos. So, I mean, it's definitely a thing. I don't know how trendy it is, but I thought, why not? I have the fabric. This was left over from an apron that I made for my Linda Belcher cosplay. I used the handle end of a paintbrush to help push out the seams, particularly the arms, to make everything nice and crisp when it was turned out. And now I'm using a little bit of black acrylic paint to paint some eyeballs on my ghost. I was being precise here because I probably should have done this before I sewed the ghost together. I was a little afraid of it bleeding through and getting paint on the back if it was too heavy. So I did like a light coating of paint. It ended up working perfectly. I think I didn't even need to worry. This was thick enough fabric. I don't think I would have had an issue. I'm just giving him 2 little eyeballs. You can add a mouth if you want to as well. I opted not to for this one. I thought the eyes were cute enough. So cute. Then you just let those dry. And I stuffed this with an old feather boa, so there's feathers everywhere. I'm still picking feathers off my clothes. Once you get it stuffed to how you want it, then you just fold those open ends in and hand stitch them closed. I don't remember what the stitch is called. It's basically a back and forth running stitch. I'm sure there's a proper name for it. I don't remember what it is. But you can see what I'm doing. And once you get to the end, knot your thread so it doesn't come undone. Oh yeah, there. I didn't realize how many feathers were still on that pillow. I can't believe that was a whole feather boa. I would have thought those things were much bigger than that. Oh yeah, and that's all over the scissors. Maybe don't use a feather boa if you're going to stuff your pillow. I needed something white so it wouldn't show through, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It's messy. It ends up being super cute though. That's an adorable little pillow. This was a fairly quick little make. I had some velvet card from the inside of a jewelry box, and I just drew out and then cut little bat shapes and threaded just some thread through it to, string them together. On the back, I covered the card with Sharpie, just so it wouldn't look like cardboard, it would look like black paper. And that's all there is to it. I picked up a bag of these little skulls from Dollar Tree. They were for a different craft, but they ended up being too big, so I might end up making that craft later. In the meantime, I've discovered a different something that I could use these skulls for. So I just picked out the one I liked the best, and with my craft knife very carefully, I cut around the top just to open the skull up. That first cut is the most tricky, but once you get through the plastic, it cuts like butter. Again, I would recommend a little bit of a sawing motion, just because once you get going, it cuts so easily. That sawing motion helps you control it, so the cut doesn't get out of hand. And I just go all the way around the top. I was just checking to make sure that my cut was even. And there we go, the top is off. And then I brought out my nail file again, this time the metal one, to just sand the cut edge a little bit and make it not so scraggly. Then I had a scrap of this really pretty fabric with these dot circles, and I cut the circles out. I thought the dots would give the flowers that I'm going to be making with this fabric a nice texture. You can see I have there are different dots within this particular fabric, black dots, light dots. Some of them I cut out 5, and some I cut out 4. And then I'm going to hot glue them together. I glued them in kind of like an arch, like a wide arch, instead of in a flat line, because I do want to make these into a circle. Then I used a paper clip, unfolded it, and wrapped the edges around themselves using my pliers, just so they're not like sharp ends out. And now I'm going to glue the flower arches, these fabric arches, around the paperclip stem. You're going to take my word for it, because this was a really tricky craft to film. It was so tiny and fiddly. I put a little bit of packing styrofoam inside the skull just to bulk it up a little bit and to give the greenery something to hang on to. And then I cut little slits to glue my greenery into. And there's the finished flowers. 2 little flowers per paper clip. Again, cut a little slit in the styrofoam so that the flowers can fit in. I bent the wires a little bit just so they weren't so straight. I wanted them to look a little bit realistic-ish, although clearly they're, you know, fake paper flowers. And there it is all together. I don't know why I glued that one leaf down, but I made an extra flower, so I have 5 now. I thought the odd number just looked better. And then inside I painted them black, just with some black acrylic. The green just looked too, I don't know, there's too much of a contrast between the green and the purple. And then I stuffed the bottom with some ripped up scraps of green paper just to hide the styrofoam. And then I made a table. The table itself is made out of one of those little plastic bits that are in the center of a pizza, you know, to keep like the box from touching the pizza. And then I cut out a scrap of black velvet in a circle and loosely stitched it with a running stitch so I could pull and tighten to give these nice billows and folds. And then the plant pot goes on top. It's so pretty! A little table and planter. For the last craft, I decided I needed to have some of these Halloween Kisses, molasses taffies, whatever you want to call them. They're my favorite candy, so I had to make them in teeny tiny version for my doll room. Isn't that so cute? Oh my goodness. What I did is I scanned one of the wrappers from the full-size candy, shrunk it down, and then printed it out. And for the actual candy inside, just to make it look like there was something, I used some scraps of foam board and cut those down super tiny, and then wrapped them up and pinched and twisted the ends so they end up looking like teeny tiny candies. And I made a bunch of them. There's 7 there in total. Oh my goodness, that just fills me with so much joy. Okay, there's the spark. It just took tiny candies. Well, the candies had to go somewhere, so I ended up making a dish out of a leaf. I found this beautiful leaf in my backyard, and I used the cap of nail polish there to form it, and I glued it in place with some gloss Mod Podge. I just thought that would make it look like a glass leaf or ceramic or something. When the outside was all dry, then I popped it off the nail polish and Mod Podged the inside. I did that a couple times to just build it up and give it a little bit more stiffness. And then put the little candies in the dish. There are probably too many candies for that dish, except that, in my opinion, you can never have too many molasses taffies. They're my favorite. I love them. Now it's time to decorate the room and see it all together for the big reveal.